Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Art Ambassador Radio Show. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, and we're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. It took 5 years of planning and more than $16 million in grants from the Getty Foundation. And Pacific Standard Time LA took over the visual landscape of Los Angeles' museums, galleries, art centers, and public spaces. Since September of last year, dozens of art exhibits have opened up in every part of Southern California for the grand overarching exhibition series Pacific Standard Time LA. LA stands for Latin American and Latino art. The more than 60 venues have been an exploration of that kind of art throughout the Southern California region. Pacific Standard Time LA was a far-reaching and ambitious exploration of Latin American and Latino art in dialogue with Los Angeles. PST LA is the latest collaborative effort from arts institutions across Southern California. It follows the initial PST Art in LA, which was mounted 6 years ago, led by the Getty and its $10 million investment in the form of grants. Regional institutions mounted shows that brought the history of contemporary art to the surface in the form of exhibitions in museums and art centers and public spaces throughout the region. Those exhibitions, on view from 2011 through 2012, aimed to define the broad scope of Southern California art. Like everything else in Southern California, the art world is spread out, it's sprawling, and it's hard to find the center sometimes. That's what brought PST into being. And it had the result of giving an art historical credence to the region by looking back at the art in the years between 1945 and 1980, when LA's contemporary art scene gave birth to artists such as Ed Ruscha, Bruce Nauman, and Chris Burden, some of the best-known names. But the art scene of those years, even with that super cool locus of the Ferris Gallery in the 1960s, was squarely centered in New York. New York was the center of the art world, and Los Angeles was seen as out in the no man's land. The best-known artists from LA always coveted shows and gallery representation in the Big Apple. This went on for decades. So to address the issue, the first Pacific Standard Time exhibitions were created 6 years ago. And LA's significant contributions of artists and its history were exposed and brought about new attention by the public. New generations of people became aware of this amazing history. Those exhibitions had the immersive effect of giving contemporary art in LA a grounding and a cohesiveness that had really just not been known. It hadn't been documented in the past, and it was something that was sorely lacked. So as a result, LA stood up and took pride, and the art world took notice. So this last fall, the second Pacific Standard Time exhibitions were mounted. These took 5 years of planning and more than $16 million in grants from the Getty Foundation. This second wave of exhibitions, Pacific Standard Time LA, focused on Latin America LA and Latino art LA and Los Angeles LA. After a 5-month run of activity in every part of Southern California, most of those shows have just closed. One example is the Hammer Museum's Radical Women, Latin American Art, 1960 to 85. Another show is featuring images from the newspaper La Raza at the Autry Museum. That's continuing on exhibit for the next couple of months. Although a number of shows are down, most of them are down, many of them will be traveling to other parts of the world, such as Peru and Spain. This has really captivated the attention of the world. The hope is that this wave of exhibitions, however, is not an ending, but a beginning. We will find out more about this today and more about the shows from my two guests who are representing two of the participating museums and arts institutions, Anu Vikram from the 18th Street Art Center and Joseph Daniel Valencia from the Vincent Price Museum of Art. We will also talk about the purpose of the exhibitions and whether it spiked the attention, interest, and attendance that was desired. Deborah Morrow, the director of the Getty Foundation, said it was clear that the shows reached a new audience, and this was one of their main goals, to reach out to new audiences. At many openings, younger people were in evidence, and many Latinos were also in attendance. And so that allowed them to broadcast their ideas on social media and reach even a larger audience. Morrow and the Getty wanted to get people to give them a sense of how vibrant LA is as an art scene, and also in producing local art. Latin America is a vast area, and we weren't trying to tell a comprehensive story, she said. We wanted to get people excited about the ideas and see more. With more than 60 shows, it was virtually impossible for any one person to see the totality of PST LA. Documentation of the shows has been significant, with published catalogs now available to art historians, galleries, art collectors, and all kinds of art lovers. PST LA was conceived in 2013 at a time when we had a president of a mixed race and African American background. And it was thought to be a look at how far we have come. But instead, it has brought forward a whole new range of issues about Latinx artists from LA and those from Latin America. The issue of immigration is at the forefront now of the political scene, and a wave of political and social conservatism and pushback has been experienced not only in the U.S., but in Latin America. On another level, and one that is indicative of the time of change that we are experiencing, is the use of the word Latinx. Latinx is a word you may not have even heard before, but it's showing up in much of the writing and the dialogue found around PST LA. In case you're not familiar with the term, Latinx is a gender-inclusive way of referring to people of Latin American descent. Spanish is a language that is based on using gender distinctions. The intention is to remove the male or female specific delineation of Latina or Latino and be more inclusive. And so the term Latinx has really taken hold and become much more used as a term to open up to include all people. So I'm going to be introducing my first guest today, Anu Vikram, the artistic director of the 18th Street Art Center in Los Angeles. And we're going to be taking a break just for a moment. I will invite you to stay with me and learn more about this amazing exhibit, PST LA, after we come back. This is Gwenda Joyce. I'm the host of the radio show, the Art Ambassador Radio Show on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Welcome back to the Art Ambassador Radio Show. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce. We're on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And today we're talking about PST LA. And my first guest I'm very pleased to introduce is Anu Vikram. She is the artistic director at the 18th Street Arts Center in Los Angeles. A very active curator and arts member of the art world. I've known Anu for a number of years, and I'm very pleased to be able to follow what she does. She organizes 6 to 10 exhibitions a year and 30 to 50 residencies with contemporary American and international artists each year. In addition, she curates exhibits of art on issues of contemporary art issues for other institutions. And she's also recently published a book. The most recently curated show, A Universal History of Infamy, Virtues of Disparity, at the 18th Street Art Center was done in collaboration with LA County Museum of Art, LACMA. Anu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Glenda. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you to tell us about the 18th Street Art Center and the roles it plays in the LA art scene.
Well, 18th Street Art Center is about to celebrate our 30th anniversary in 2018. We were founded on Halloween in 1988 as a home for independent artists in the Los Angeles area. Specifically, we were founded out of a community of performance-based and live artists generated from within the ranks of the High Performance magazine, which was published here in Los Angeles from the 1970s until the early 1990s, and was one of the first international magazines dealing with performance art as a form. So 18th Street was founded as a place for artists to live, and very soon after its founding, within about 5 years, the International Residency Program was created, which really set our direction as a place where the world meets Los Angeles and Los Angeles meets the world through an artist-driven discourse. And so we run, as you mentioned, a number of different artist residencies. We bring artists from around the world. We brought over 500 artists from over 60 countries in the duration of our residency program. We also have a quarterly project show with an LA-based artist, generally a early mid-career artist or an emerging artist. And we do small project shows with other LA-based artists. We do community-based projects. We do educational projects, and we do collaboration. So the project we did for Pacific Standard Time LA was a collaboration with Los Angeles County Museum of Art. It was organized at 18th Street Art Center by myself and my colleagues here on staff. It was actually curated by 3 curators who spent the majority of the duration. Most of them are based at LACMA. At one point, all 3 of them were based at LACMA, although Pilar Tompkins-Rivas, who preceded me as artistic director at 18th Street Art Center, is now the director of the Vincent Price Art Museum, whose curatorial assistant I believe you will be speaking with shortly. So there's a nice sort of keeping in the family here because these institutions all have a deep connection that was forged through this 5-year partnership.
And that's a very important part of all of this, I think. And one of the goals is to create more collaboration and develop relationships between these institutions. So tell us about how a universal history of infamy, virtues of disparity, came about. And I understand at the 18th Street Art Center, it's really been a 5-year project for you. And this is very diverse and multi-layered. How did this all sort of play out?
Well, originally the goal was for the artists to gain the opportunity to immerse themselves in the environment of Los Angeles through 2-month residencies that would allow them to do research that would ultimately result in the works that were presented for the exhibition. So this conversation began in 2013. The first round of grants that LACMA applied to in 2013 included securing funding to send Pilar Tompkins-Rivas, Rita Gonzalez, and Jose Luis Blondet to different countries in Latin America to meet with artists and to visit different artist spaces and to create the list of artists that they would want to bring for the residencies. So in 2014, when I came on board, January 2014, was shortly after Pilar had moved from 18th Street to LACMA. And so my job was then to provide the link to the community of Los Angeles for these artists from Latin America through the 18th Street Residency Program, because this is really what we're designed to do. So we took a very hands-on approach. My wonderful research assistant on our project, Betty Marin, who also provided the Spanish language fluency that was so important to making those artists feel at home, accompanied them and took them around to meet with different fabricators or to pursue different research interests. We had to potentially intervene to secure access, as when the Venezuelan artist Angelo Benares wanted to get up close to David Alfaro Siqueiros mural in downtown Los Angeles that had been restored and is, I believe, if I remember correctly, that restoration was organized by the Getty. So she wanted to get closer than the viewing platform would allow, and we had to gain special access to the facility on her behalf so that she could make the work ultimately. And so those sorts of things, or Zidian Madigan, the artist who created a large-scale outdoor work for the exterior of the Broad Contemporary Art Museum at LACMA, that is a project that required significant engineering expertise to successfully fabricate and install. And so for those artists, it was not simply about researching themes and potentially images in the work, which did emerge very much from the landscape of Los Angeles and really our own campus here in Santa Monica as well, but also to be able to build the relationships with people on the building staff and facility staff at LACMA who would make it possible for them to be able to realize this work. And so sometimes it's those relationships developed over 2-3 years of communication, initiated with a face-to-face contact, that make all the difference when it comes to realizing really ambitious projects. So we saw our role as twofold. It was very much to represent what we imagined the interests, concerns, and focuses of the community, specifically the Latin American or Latino community here and in Los Angeles, but also the broader community of Santa Monica and Los Angeles and the artists of the community, and what we thought they would bring to the conversation when they approached the works by these artists.
As many of you are understanding and learning, this is a multi-layered process that takes years and years of building relationships and making those connections that are really important. We're going to be talking more with Anu Vikram of the 18th Street Art Center when we come back to the Art Ambassador radio show. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to the Art Ambassador radio show with your host, myself, Gwenda Joyce, on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're talking with Anu Vikram, the artistic director and curator of the show, A Universal History of Infamy, Virtues of Disparity, that has been on exhibit at the 18th Street Art Center as part of PST-LA. And Anu, I'd like to know specifically about this show. It just sounds fascinating. It was Virtues of Disparity was structured around themes of reproduction and deception, and the works investigated the shortcomings of different systems of writing and transcriptions and their contested relation to authenticity. What actual works in the show presented these ideas?
Well, it was such an interesting time to do a show about these themes, Gwenda, because as you mentioned, the context for this project shifted so dramatically from its inception until its realization. So in the period between 2013 and 2017, so much has taken place. And one thing that really came out at the opening of this exhibition was the sense of the deception that people buy into collectively because they wish to. And we see a lot of that in our contemporary politics now, there's no longer a kind of pretense of honesty. It's really, subjective honesty. And so it was very interesting to see these artists kind of take this institutional kind of questioning approach, the very research-heavy post-colonial approach to content, to the image itself, to the question of a series of images and how they comprise an archive. And where archives exist and perhaps where they don't exist and whose archives don't exist. And so this whole notion of truth, how we determine it, how we structure it, how we preserve it, how we articulate it was in play throughout the exhibition. So there were actually 3 exhibitions. The Universal History of Infamy show that was anchored at Los Angeles County Museum of Art is actually still on for another week at the Broad Contemporary Art Museum. And that features the majority of the site-specific and new commissioned works that emerged from our residencies between 2015 and 16. The works that were on view at 18th Street were largely small works because our own gallery is quite small. It's also not climate controlled. So we were looking at works that could potentially travel to small artist-run institutions in other countries, such as in Latin America. We were also looking at some of the works that the curators, who again were Rita Gonzalez, Jose Luis Blondet, and Pilar Tompkins Rivas, had been looking at prior to they're commissioning these artists to create new work. So it provided another chapter for the exhibition, and it also provided another layer of context. But when it came to the works that were created for the exhibition, specifically through the residencies, I think you really can see visually, as well as through the content, a lot of the influence of spending concentrated time in this environment, in this community, really emerges in the forms of these works that were created. Then there's a third venue.
Can you give us one example of that, Anu? I'm just trying to bring it to a visual form. Yeah.
Sure. So, one good example, I think, is even that one piece that I mentioned, Zinnia and Madigan, on the exterior of the BCAN building. It's right on Wilshire Boulevard, and it is a two-piece stretched banner that stretches all 4 stories of height of that building, featuring an overlapping palm tree kind of shading pattern in various hues of brown, green, and ochre that reflects the shifting light in our landscape here in Santa Monica, very sunny, surrounded by palm trees. That kind of classic California orange, yellow light that you get in Southern California is very present in the work. And it's a way of connecting visually with the actual street in front of LACMA as well. And it's also actually physically connected because the Wilshire Boulevard corridor is the physical conduit between the 3 spaces, Vincent Price, the Charles White Elementary School, which is in the Westlake District to the east of LACMA itself, and then 18th Street Arts Center, which is slightly south of Wilshire to the west side. So we found it geographically as well as visually to be a kind of site-specific anchor. But another different example might be carried, for example, in the work that, give me a minute, I spoke with so many artists over the period of time. I think the work that Angela Bernardi did that I was talking about is a really good example of another approach where for her, this is about a hidden history here in LA. There was another show, another Pacific Standard Time LA show at La Plaza, which is a gallery of Mexican American Chicano history or Chicanx history here in LA, called Murales Rebeldes, that talked about these Siqueiros murals and how they were whitewashed because their content was deemed too socialist or communist for public taste and public buildings. So for Angela, who's coming from Venezuela, which has a very different political system and very different social and cultural context, to uncover these murals, one of which, as I said, has been restored, but another of which actually was not restored and continues to be largely whitewashed. She made a whole work about that mural that is no longer visible. And that piece was exhibited as a 500-piece puzzle here at 18th Street Arts Center that the public could assemble and disassemble and participate in the kind of action of covering and uncovering the secret histoy themselves.
Well, those are fascinating. Those are fascinating ways to bring people into engagement. The murals, of course, are very public and probably could be seen as you're driving down the street. And then with the puzzle, you have something that in the gallery where you're encouraging people to interact. Did you make specific outreach to bring people in? And did you find the engagement to be something that stimulated people to this new topic? How did that work out?
Absolutely. Well, one of the aspects of our exhibition was actually a whole educational program attendant to our exhibition that was developed in collaboration with the Santa Monica Local School District, Santa Monica High School, and John Adams Middle School participated in this project with curriculum that was directly drawn from the exhibitions related to our show. So those students had the opportunity to examine the deeper histories the artists were drawing on and also to create their own interpretations of these works or forms of work, which we also exhibited at a different location on our campus. So that brought this whole other community of students and their families in, gave them an opportunity to see this show as well. And I also think that the emphasis on bilingual programming exceeded the parameters of the PST project and actually began to inform everything about the way that we conduct ourselves in our community. So there's been a significant outreach element in our programming directed at the Spanish language community of our neighborhood and looking at their history as a community in our neighborhood, which isn't directly related to PST-LA, but was very much informed by it and informed it as well.
Well, there's so much in relation to what you do at the Art Center and the community and bringing in the parts of the larger art scene. And Anu Vikram, thank you so much for talking to us today on the Art Ambassador radio show about your involvement in the PST-LA. We're going to take a short break. This is Gwenda Joyce of the Art Ambassador. We're coming to you from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay with us. We have more. Welcome back to the Art Ambassador radio show. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, and we are on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. This radio show talks about art and the amazing goings-on in the art world, and I want to bring people into relationship with art. The example that we're talking about today is this fabulous exhibit, many exhibitions in Southern California as part of Pacific Standard Time LA. My next guest is Joseph Daniel Valencia. He is an arts writer and museum professional and serves as the curatorial assistant and special projects coordinator at the Vincent Price Museum of Art, where he helps produce exhibitions, public programs, and special initiatives that are drawn from the director's office. Since 2016, Joseph has been extremely involved in the research, implementation, and now traveling components of the exhibit that was mounted for PST-LA called Laura Aguilar Show and Tell. The Laura Aguilar exhibition shows the important nude photographs of the artists, and they are often examined through the lens of self-portraiture and hybrid cultural identity. This includes portrayals of the artist's body in nature, particularly set against the forms of rocks and stones, and exposing her vulnerability and relating her to her environment. This is a groundbreaking show. Laura Aguilar's work has received a tremendous amount of attention over the last 20 years. Vincent Price Museum of Art director Pilar Tompkins-Rivas described her work as so important for its many intersections across queer, brown communities, and in relationship to feminist and Latinx scholarship. I'd like to welcome Joseph Valencia to the show. Thank you for being here, Joseph.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Well, please start by telling us about the Vincent Price Art Museum, which I know is part of the East LA College. What is the mandate of the museum itself?
Yes, so the Vincent Price Art Museum is actually, like you said, on campus of East Los Angeles College. Our name comes from Vincent Price, who is known for his films, but aside from that, he was also an art collector. And over the course of his life, actually donated his collection to East Los Angeles College. And so that's where our name comes from. But really, he donated his collection because he recognized that on the East Side, at least, there really wasn't an art collection that students and community members could engage with. So that's what he started doing, and now that really informed our mission as a museum to serve as a unique educational resource for all of our audiences that we serve, particularly at the college, but also abroad across the region of Los Angeles.
This is Gwenda Joyce. I'm the host of the Art Ambassador radio show on BBM Global Network and TuneIn. I'm here with Joseph Valencia of the Vincent Price Art Museum. And Joseph, I'm curious to know how the Laura Aguilar show came about. It's a quite bold kind of exhibition for the museum and controversial, I would imagine. But also a way for the museum to get attention, to bring attention to this wonderful artist. Tell us how this came about.
Well, as you've mentioned, this exhibition was is part of the Pacific Standard Time LA initiative. And when we as a museum started thinking about, well, what could we contribute to this initiative, it became very clear that we would do a survey of Laura Aguilar. The artist is an alumna of East Los Angeles College, and although she has received critical attention for different parts of her bodies of work, there really wasn't a comprehensive look done. There has been a solo show, a much smaller one in Texas, but there was nothing done at this level for an artist who no longer produces work and has already had so much to create. And so we wanted to honor her. That's something that we do. We connect with artists who are connected to East Los Angeles College. And it was originally really the vision of our former director, Karen Rapp, who wanted to honor Laura Aguilar. It was one of the first exhibitions that she had wanted to produce. It was something that she had actually considered for the first Getty initiative. As you mentioned, that initiative spanned Los Angeles art from the 40s to the 80s. And Laura's work, although she created work in the 80s, continued to make work through the 90s and the 2000s. And so it really didn't fit in that first initiative. And so it was Karen who then went with the grant and the proposal for the second Pacific Standard Time. And it was all of us who came together to bring it to life, really.
Well, there's a fascinating series of works called the Plush Pony series in the Laura Aguilar show.
Yes,
and
of course.
Tell me about that. The Plush Pony was a working-class lesbian bar in El Sereno, a neighborhood east of downtown LA, where Aguilar met the women who formed the core of this series. So tell us about this series. It must have been rather shocking for people to see.
Yes, so this series was created in 1992. It's really a photo essay, and it's really created in response to a previous series that the artist had made. Laura Aguilar in the late 80s and early 90s was commissioned by a mental health conference to create positive images of Latina lesbians. So she created these photographs, which are what the series is called, the Latina Lesbian Series. But all of these women were friends, and they were all either lawyers or doctors or pretty well-off Latinas. And what she had noticed was that she wasn't really representing the working class side of her community. The Plush Pony was a bar that she frequented as just an individual. And so she kind of got that idea one time while she was visiting there that, hey, this could be a series. These photographs could, through the process of making these works, could be something that kind of evens out my own catalog as an artist. That's what the artist was thinking. So she befriended these individuals, these regulars at this bar, and really brought her own backdrop and took photographs of these women at the bar. Unfortunately, the Plush Pony no longer exists. And so these photographs are really documenting a sense of place and a sense of time, and really are ahead of themselves, I would say, in terms of, they could very well have been created, in the present moment right now. They have such this contemporary moment, and the works themselves they really align with the moment now, and seeing them in this exhibition really is really able to speak to Laura and her work as something that was very much ahead of its time.
This really plays up the point of how history can be re-examined and change the way we look at things. And through showing works like this in an art museum, change the way we look at the world around us and bring more things and different things into focus. How do you find that the audience engaged with this work? And did you get any sense of the way the show affected your audience?
Absolutely. The museum is located on the border of East Los Angeles and the city of Monterey Park. And actually, one of the images from the Plush Pony series we selected to be an exterior banner for the museum. And that is a new thing for the museum. We've never had exterior banners. And we reprinted one of the photographs across the entire exterior of our museum. Right on Avenida Cesar Chavez, which is so great when you drive by, and even when you're exiting the freeway, it's very present. You see the Plush Pony series. And I can just tell you as, a staff member, someone, exiting the museum after work, people people see the image and it draws them in. And we have a story of an individual who was just crossing the street and saw the billboard and rushed into the museum to see what was that. There certainly is a power to seeing yourself represented in an institution like a museum, and to have these photos of working class Chicana lesbian women on the outside of a museum. It certainly was something that brought in our community directly into our space.
That sounds great in terms of really aligning with your community. Do you feel that was there any controversy that people were perhaps upset or uncomfortable about any of the goings on?
Well, I think that one might think that controversy surrounded this exhibition, but that really wasn't the case here. I think because our institution, we're part of a community college, we're part of, an educational location or place, we're really framed in a space or in a context that really didn't afford controversy. I mean, certainly this exhibition is really grounded here on the East Side, and so many people who came to visit the exhibition saw themselves represented on the walls, or actually knew the people that were in these photographs, like the plush pony, or like I mentioned, the Latina lesbian series. So yes, there is a lot of nudity in the exhibition, and that was a concern, I think, from the very beginning in terms of the development of the exhibition. But I think that we were lucky, and I think that we're in a moment where, image saturated world. That's not necessarily something that was that controversial for us.
That's so nice to hear, Joseph, because I think sometimes we worry about things and we fabricate and imagine reactions to be worse than they actually are. And yet when we put images out into the public, images are so powerful that they often are an opportunity for connection in a way that really brings people together. And speaking of bringing people together, this exhibition is going to be traveling. I know you've had a lot to do with having this show travel. And in fact, as you were saying today, the exhibit is actually being packed up and shipped off as we speak. So tell us about this, the next step for the show and how that came about. It's very exciting.
Yes. So. Yeah, we're, as like you mentioned, as we speak, we're deinstalling the galleries right now and packaging the works. They're going to be traveling to the Frost Art Museum. It's the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum located in Miami, Florida, on another college campus. They're located on Florida International University campus. But so I would say about a year ago, our director, Pilar Tompkins Rivas, was really shopping the exhibition around, trying to find locations to have this exhibition live longer past, our showing here. And we really struggled to try to find people that would either fit us into the schedule or would want to take on the show. And I would say that it wasn't until the exhibition actually opened and that we received so much positive press and recognition that the phone calls started coming in, and who wanted to pick up the show, and how could we make those negotiations. And so, we're in a lot of different talks right now, hopefully to travel the show, but we're happy to report that our official partner is the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum.
Well, I hope you get other venues for the exhibition and that it does travel farther. It will be very interesting to see the show at the Frost Museum. I think that context makes a lot of difference when you have. I love to see museum exhibitions that are mounted in 2 or 3 different museums, and I'm fascinated with how different it always is in terms of the way I experience an exhibition, depending on which museum or space it is being exhibited in, and that context has so much to do with it. Do you feel that this PST opportunity for you has been successful, and has it been what you wanted it to be?
Yes, of course. I think this exhibition really exceeded everything that we had had in terms of expectations and reception, and like I said, this show and this artist is very much grounded in this part of town, and it really makes sense that we organized this survey of her life and her work. And we've had so many experiences since September when our show opened of people engaging and so many people, coming to tears in terms of their connection, direct personal connection with the work. So we know that it makes a lot of sense, and we've had a lot of amazing experiences with the show, and we're very, like you said, curious to see what it's going to be like in Miami, where, for example, the Latinx community is not comprised majority of Mexican Americans, but rather, Cuban Americans or wherever it may be. So, her show, well, I mean, certainly I think people will connect with it, but it's going to be in a different way.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on the show to talk with you about this. We're going to take a break from the Art Ambassador show right now. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And when we come back, I'm going to find out from our guests where they think this will lead. Stay with us. Hello, and we are back on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. This is the Art Ambassador Radio Show with your host, Gwenda Joyce. And we've been talking about Pacific Standard Time, LA, with my two guests today. And I'm very curious to know from you if you have ideas and thoughts about where you would like this to lead. It's one thing to have a big exhibition like this be mounted, but I think everyone wants it to have an impact on cultural equity and really make a change. So do you have any thoughts briefly as we wrap up today's show? Go ahead and jump in. Joseph, do you have thoughts?
Okay, well, I'll talk. I'm sorry.
Anu, go ahead.
Anu, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak briefly to, I definitely think for our institution that we are very excited about maintaining and developing the relationships that have been initiated over these last few years with new members of our audience and new constituencies. And we're also extremely excited about the incredibly talented staff we've been able to hire with the support of the Getty. And that a lot of being able to maintain both those relationships and that staffing comes down to future resources that I think, as I said in my article, the responsibility now transfers from the Getty to other members of the supportive community of philanthropists and art patrons in the LA metro region to ensure that our institutions can maintain the programs and the staffing that they need to serve these new constituencies well.
And I hope that does come about. And Anu was referring to an article she wrote called The Big Lie, in which she feared that artists of color and cultural production from marginalized communities might just satisfy a temporary interest on the part of the public and not exactly really lead to change. And we're hoping that there is actually change that comes from the institutions. And Joseph, do you have any comment on this as we move forward?
I would say there's certainly a bit of fear that, institutions that maybe don't have the resources or only have contracted staff funded through the Getty to support these initiatives, that maybe that it goes away. We're hopeful that it doesn't go away. I mean, I just saw online that Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles hired their contract staff full time. So, I mean, those are the things that are ideal. In terms of the Vincent Price Art Museum, we are committed to serving our community and the people that are around us in the museum, which are majority Latinx and Asian American individuals. So we're very committed to representing that within the walls of our space. And it's really up to, like Anu said, the space of the institutions themselves now to maintain that commitment and see if they're able to. Because staffing and all that is money.
Yeah. Well, I think there will be changes moving forward, and we can all look out for it. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Pacific Standard Time exhibitions and how much they are impacting the art world. today's show has brought to light the fact that the art world is dynamic and growing and constantly changing and evolving. And no more is this more evident than in LA. My own consulting business, The Art Ambassador, is designed to help people navigate the breadth and the variety of the art world. And if you are interested in some help, I invite you to go to artambassador.net and apply and have a free consultation with me. I also invite you, if you're an art lover, to consider joining us on some of the Art Ambassador tours. And you can sign up at artambassadortours.com, where we actually visit places to see art and engage with art in person. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to my guests. This is the Art Ambassador Radio Show. I'm your host, Gwenda Joyce, and we're on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Join us again next week for more Art World Talk.